All right, if you're anything like me, you hate running out of food on a trip. It's like a big fear, and so I'm a big fan of snacks during an adventure, and one of my absolute favorite go-to snacks are wonderful pistachios. You may be familiar with pistachios and the brand Wonderful Pistachios, but if you're not, they are one of the highest protein nuts out there. 1 ounce serving of Wonderful Pistachios is 6 grams of protein. That's 10% of your daily value. It also includes 9 essential amino acids, and they come with a ton of different flavors, varieties. There's a spicy version, there's lightly salted, there's no salted, there's so many, and every time I go on an adventure, I'm not even lying, I take an entire bag with me. And what's cool too, I love having the Wonderful Pistachio in shell, because then that almost gives me something to do and focus on as I'm paddling or biking through the really monotonous parts of the adventure. Every great adventure is going to have plenty of boring moments, and it's nice to have something to do and also something that is giving you some fuel, like Wonderful Pistachios. So they're one of my favorite adventure snacks, favorite road trip snacks, and definitely leave me feeling better than a lot of other snacks you can turn to. So if you want to learn more about how to fuel your next adventure with Wonderful Pistachios, go to wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Today we are throwing it back to 2022 when we had Moose Mutlow on the show. Moose, ever since 2002, he has been a member and senior trainer for the Yosemite Search and Rescue, working as a technician within Incident Command at one of the busiest search and rescue operations in the world. YOSAR, Yosemite Search and Rescue, is so prestigious. It's one, like I just said, one of the best and busiest operations in the world. Moose is very important there, and today he's talking to us about his experience. He also has years and years and years of guiding and wilderness field instruction experience, and we're going to be talking about his book called Searching: Finding Purpose, Laughter, and Distraction Through Search and Rescue. Just about his experience. A lot of us go out and enjoy these places like Yosemite and different national parks and wild areas or out in the ocean. You know, one reason we get to go so confidently out there and we get to enjoy them is because there's this infrastructure of search and rescue. People like Moose who are there when things go wrong to help you get through it. And yeah, they have saved countless lives. It's an amazing service. It's an amazing thing that constantly gives back to society. And we're going to talk to what it's like to be in this world and maybe how you might be able to get involved too. So I hope you enjoy. And this is kind of part of our unofficial series about all those peripheral supporting things in society that make adventure possible. Let's dive in. All right, folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today, I'm excited to talk to Moose Mutlow. Moose, welcome to the show.
Mason, thank you very much for having me along for the ride.
Yes, Moose. Quick backstory: I've never been involved with YOSAR, but I used to live in Yosemite Valley. Met and listened to John Dill's talk many times. Always impressed with what y'all did. Tons of action. For the time I lived there back in 2014. And yeah, you guys were, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was world-class search and rescue. And you're a huge part of that. It's pretty exciting to talk to you.
Yeah, I think huge is an interesting word. It's like search and rescue is you're the sum of all the parts. And so at any given time, there's somebody dangling under a helicopter, but there's a ton of people trying to figure out how to safely refuel the helicopter at the same time. So it's a high functioning team. And John Dill, who you talked about, is that legend who, the closer you are to the sport, the more you're involved with climbing, the more you understand John's influence in rescue. And I think that's the beauty of rescue is, for the most part, people are faceless. You're all working as a unified team for a common goal to have an outcome that everybody wants, which is saving somebody.
And those are exactly the people I love to talk to and listen to because, you know, they're not pushing. I know you've got a book and whatnot, but you seem like the type of person, the more you talk to, the more you're going to discover and like, wow, this is This is amazing what you do, and it's something that we don't often think about. But you also got to be the only moose in Yosemite Valley.
Actually, there's like two or three of them. It turns out there's a little bit
Really?
of confusion out there. There aren't many that are a formerly skinny Brit though. Like
Right. Okay. Yeah. That
it's
definitely
that is sets me apart a little bit. Yeah.
sets you apart a little bit more. And I usually ask this first. I forgot this time. Where are you coming from today? Where's home for you?
I'm an hour outside of Yosemite. I'm in Mariposa, which is one of the gateway towns that has its economy so tightly linked into Yosemite National Park.
Absolutely. I've been through Mariposa many, many times. Love the Sierras. Love Yosemite. Favorite place in the world. Thank goodness for folks like y'all. So tell me, I know you've told probably these stories 1,000 times, but give us the rundown of like how did you get into search and rescue? Because I've heard you mention things like you don't like heights, you don't like being exposed on mountains, you don't like a lot of the things that you would associate with Yosar. How did you get into it?
I I come from a background of being an outdoor guide and instructor in lots of different countries and just getting a lot of outdoor experience through expeditions and just being out there. You end up in situations where you end up perhaps being the first line of help. So in the lake, when I worked in the Lake District, which is in the northwest of England, people would come in the pub and say, "Oh, we've got somebody at the trail who needs a hand down," and you would go out as a guide and help somebody down the trail. We rescued a dog one time because it was too tired to walk down the trail. Um, and then over time and different locations, you build enough into your resume that you become credible in certain areas. And so by the time I got to Yosemite, I have a pretty good resume in swiftwater rescue and then within communication skills, working with uh, families of people who were searching for or who have died. And so you end up finding your niche. And so I came into it uh, by being in Yosemite and then having high availability and being prepared to do stuff like stuff sleeping bags and fold ropes at the end of a mission rather than necessarily being on the hasty team going up and getting vitals on somebody having a cardiac on the trail. You have to do your time in the background before you get into the inner workings of the team.
Was it just happenstance from being a guide? Because a lot of people get into the outdoors or get into an adventure and they're like, oh, I want to be, a guide very, very frequently or a professional athlete. I work with a lot of pro athletes that are, maybe trail runners or whatnot. When did your mind shift towards, I want to help people do this? Because that's not the way a lot of people end up thinking about a career in the outdoors.
So I'd worked for a group called Outward Bound internationally, and by the time I got to working for the North Carolina Outward Bound School, we were actually a mountain rescue unit on call for the local Burke County Rescue, and we would go out on technical rescues and help back them up with the litter carryouts. Also with prison crews, we would work, which is always exciting. And so it was an undercurrent of Outward Bound is service, is the idea of reaching beyond yourself to help other people. And so it tied in perfectly with that service ethic. And I was never that fixed on summits or big rivers I was fixed on the experience in that moment. And so doing a bunch of 14ers, if that's your bag, great. It wasn't for me. I was prepared to put that on hold a little bit if somebody was having a problem somewhere else on the slope and go and help. That's more the summit is the summit of being human is not gaining that peak. The summit is giving of yourself to another person when they're in a moment of need.
Mm. And what eventually led you to Yosemite? Kind of you tell me if I'm wrong, the pinnacle of this world in a lot of ways, maybe here in the States, or at least one of the busiest.
Well, I mean, my job, I work, my primary job is working in environmental education with a provider called Nature Bridge. And I got the opportunity to come to Yosemite as an education director within their field science program, and then became a community member for YOSAR because my office is in the valley right next to the Sarkash. And I was younger and single, and I would be in the valley a lot. So when the tone went out for rescue, I could get to the cache pretty quickly, and it could probably be picked up on an 80 higher. And then it's just exciting. But I get excited about all parts of the search and rescue. Like I get excited about the energy in the search and rescue cache when you're trying to figure out what's going on and you're putting stuff up on the dry erase board, as much as charging off up the trail or sitting down with the family and doing an interview about where somebody might be. All of those pieces I find exciting because it's this mystery. You've got this a little bit of information, and as you go deeper into it, into the adventure of it, you get more and more information, and then you end up with this mathematical problem you have to solve. You're inheriting somebody else's chaos, but it comes like a math story problem because you've got to get from A to B with X amount of resources. And everybody's focused in that moment on solving it. Where else do we find in the world that there may be some debate about, are we going to go left or right? We're going to go up and down on this particular boulder. But for the most part, you're all going in the same direction. You're totally unified.
You're kind of like my son who, when an ambulance drives by with its lights on, he gets really excited too. And he'll start clapping. He's little. And I'm like, oh, and that's sweet. You know, this person's having the worst day of their life. My son's pretty excited about it.
Well, I had this great experience where we turned up for a river rescue, and it was summer, and you know the river in the valley, it kind of dries up, and it's just big pools, and because of the way that we do response, you have to gear up. So we're terribly over protected in that moment with helmets and boots and wetsuits, and we have to swim the river and get this guy who's dislocated his shoulder, I think, across the river. And it's not that difficult. And there's kids playing in the shallows and families are sitting around drinking beer. And we sort of pile out of the vehicle and we swim across the river to get this guy. And there's plenty of people watching and filming. And we realize that he's not a compliant patient. He's definitely gone to a zone that he does not want to move. And we end up borrowing the family's tiny kid raft. So they have this mermaid kid raft or something, and we swim that across, and I dump him in and I swim him across the river inside this kid's raft because that was the thing we had to rescue him with. We put him in the ambulance. He's a lot happier because he starts getting painkillers, and we turn around to strip our gear off, and the kids have taken the raft and they've gone to where we were, and they were playing rescue in that moment. They were taking it in turns to be the rescuer and be the victim. And I reflect on that because the family may have video of that. They may have pictures of that. These kids may have memory of that, but they were playing a game about helping each other. And I love that. I think if we have that somehow pushed into our DNA at the earliest age, we will make the world a better place.
Another couple talks I was listening to, you talk so much about just, you know, it's not rocket science what you do. It's a lot like listening to people, having compassion, being relatively fit, but you know, outside of the technical climate and, you know, being able to fly a helicopter, stuff like that, it's a lot of basic stuff that you're doing. It's just meeting people where they are and being someone who cares. It seems like it stems from those fundamental manners and ways to get along that kids are supposed to know.
Yeah, I think everybody wants to be treated with respect. If you treat a patient with respect and you try to open pathways to communication, they are going to put themselves in a better position to be treated and to manage their pain because they'll have confidence in you and they're going to give you more accurate information, and it's going to make your job easier. If you've got somebody who's a bit out of it because they've made a decision around a substance, you don't ratchet it up. You de-escalate it. You bring it down. You get into a safer zone. And I think those all set you up to accomplish difficult tasks. There's a lot of fear. When you load somebody in a helicopter, their eyes get real big because they're fearful, because they're in this machine that's designed to self-destruct, and the pilot is trained to stop it from doing so. And you're putting this person in there, and that they have to trust in that moment. And I think the people who are dangling below the helicopters they come in with this calmness. They have this. They don't elevate their pulse. They bring their pulse down because it's already exciting. They don't need to add to it by sort of essentially yee-hawing it. And I think controlling the emotion in a genuine way is the thing that makes everything better for everybody.
You've mentioned that you work with a lot of water. You're not necessarily up on the granite walls. And I remember John Dill having this picture he would share at his presentation where it showed kids next to a river. And then the next image was the exact same picture, but instead of where the water of the river was, it was edited to look like a cliff drop off. And he said the level of danger is exactly the same. Can you talk to us about like the danger of water and the things you've seen, and maybe a few stories about what you've done there in Yosemite in the river?
So John has another great metaphor where he talks, or analogy, where he talks about you wouldn't play on the side of a highway with cars going by you at 80 miles an hour. You would step back. You'd be the other side of the safety rail. And that's the river. It's the river. Stuff happens incredibly quickly. And I think the river moves you away from safety to where the maximum flow is or where the hazards are unerringly. It just does it. And it happens in seconds, and you have a moment to adjust to that. Because if you inhale water and you go vertical, you're going to get your knees banged up. You may get your foot trapped, and then you're going to be in that negative oxygen environment. And within less than 15 seconds, you're done. Water is so much more powerful than so many visitors understand. I used to say that people were like unlucky or stupid, and that was terribly judgmental. And now I just think that people are disconnected with the reality of that environment. You see these rivers and you want to get close to them and touch them. That's predominantly the reason people have accidents here, is they reach out to touch the water and they slip in, or they get a little bit out on the edge and they're above something that they jumped in when they were a kid. They jumped into water, but they're jumping into white water, which is aerated water. So you actually sink below that white fluffy stuff. Your buoyancy is much lower in that foam pile. And you have no idea that it's going to be going at 20 miles an hour. It's faster than you can run along the shore. And that it's going to have the percussive effect of falling out of a car. You're going to be hitting rocks. And that, most of what I've dealt with historically in the park, I think 2/3 of the water missions I've been on are body recoverers. You get a call and you have optimism in that moment. And then as you investigate it, you realize they're an hour up the trail and they're dead. If they were on a rock, you would have heard that they were a rock in the middle of the river. And so you have these sobering moments where a family wants the right outcome. You want the right outcome. You have more information because of your experience, and you know that this is going to have a negative. It's going to be negative. You're going to be doing a search, not a recovery. You're not doing a rescue.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. Are you looking to sell anything at all online? Well, I would advise you to look into Shopify. They are a global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. I use Shopify every day at my day job. It has been with us since our company was a tiny little team all the way up to where we are today, one of the biggest breweries in the country. Whether you're auctioning off autographed apparel, selling sleek skis, or selling non-alcoholic beer like we are at Athletic Brewing, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their personal POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify has got you covered. We manage a podcast, a blog, all that right there on our Shopify store. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. and has extensive help resources for whenever you're dealing with an obstacle. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ASP, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ASP for Adventure Sports Podcast now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/ASP. This upcoming concert season will be all about the boots, and Tecovas is your stop for the best in Western style, Tecovas has seasonal and limited edition offerings this spring and summer, including men's and women's cowboy boots, apparel, hats, bags, and more. So stop by your local Tecovas store, have a complimentary drink or two, and shop new styles. The smell of fresh leather and the friendly staff are at your service. Many stores even have leather custom branding to make your boots truly personalized. And with regular live music and events, there's no in-store experience like it. If you can't make it into a store, that's fine. Just go to tecovas.com. That's TECOVAS.com. They offer free shipping on all boots as well as free returns and exchanges. They ship right to your door. Go to tecovas.com and find your new favorite pair of boots today and get ready for this summer. If you ever thought, can I pull off a pair of cowboy boots? Then you should pull on a pair of Tecovas and you'll see they'll become your new favorite footwear. Cowboys knew what they were doing when they invented this Western wear. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
You mentioned that happens so much. Rarely do you get to say someone survived in the river specifically. There was a first time this happened for you. Did you find yourself dealing with it better than you expected? How did you, I don't know, inch your way into this family liaison role, especially with water, and understanding that, like, okay, maybe my emotions are geared in a way that can you handle this better than the rest of us, or you just have been forced to?
Well, I come from a background of facilitation and counseling.
Yeah, and you're British too. I'm sure that helps.
Well, yeah, but we're a repressed nation. We're a nation that the stiff upper lip means, like, don't show your emotion, which is ridiculous because you're watching people in emotional crisis. They've lost this part of their family and it's gone forever, and you're seeing them within moments of it happening. And to stand there as a rock, be a rock in this sea of chaos is insane, because you have to be human in that moment. And it doesn't mean you break down with them and wail, but you have to say it's okay for them to have this emotional breakdown. And for me, I actually started training as a family liaison officer in the park system, and I went to this half-day training that was mainly photocopied sheets and talking through protocol. And I'd already got most of the communication skills to deal with it. And I think 2 or 3 weeks later, I was out on a call for the death of a young person, and things just lined up because when I'd been with guiding groups, I'd had occasion where I had to go out to groups in remote settings and escort people out the backcountry because a parent had died, or I had a situation where someone's sibling had ended their life, and I had to go out and explain to the brother, to the sister, what had happened because the parents weren't available. So I'd had some exposure to it. And then my success in family liaison is probably in part based on the fact I have a really good practitioner understanding of what it's like to be out in winter conditions, or be up on a mountain, or be a climber, or be on the river. I can break those things down to layman terms so it's understandable. You aren't confused by a bunch of acronyms. It's all communication. And being honest, there's definitely times where I've broken down with families because it's just really sad. It's awful what's happened. And then you sort of pick yourself up, and you've shared this moment, and then you go back into your, I call it objective compassion. You see where people are coming from, you feel it, and then you keep the process moving forward on an administrative level to either reunite the family with their loved ones' possessions and body, or move them to the next level of investigation at the coroner's office outside your jurisdiction. There's a pathway there, and you'll help guide them along that pathway.
How do you prepare to give them this news?
You do a lot of scripting. You sit down. I sit down with the rangers or whoever's doing the notification, if I'm going to have somebody else do the notification, and we pull the notebook out and we write down what we're going to say, what the progression's going to be, and we practice it a little bit. And then you go in and you tell the news that no mother wants to hear. And I always say mother because there's a noise that mums make when they realize they've lost a child that is out of this world. And I've heard it a lot. And it's this absolute wrenching noise. To all the people who do extreme sports, be aware that if you had this accident, some people might say, well, you died doing what you love. And I'm like, those last few seconds must have been terrifying. But no, your mom is probably going to make this noise. And it's this deep well of loss. It is this, I mean, I'm kind of shaking as I say it, and I feel my hair raising on the back of my neck because it comes back to me. That if you, there was a film called Masters of Rock or something, and it had Peter Croft in it, and he was talking about solo climbing, and he said if you're solo climbing for anybody but yourself, when you fall, you've had a terrible joke paid upon you, and there's that sort of instant cost for you as an individual. But there's this ripple of cost through your community and family that you probably can't really gauge. And actually that ripple, when it affects the parent, is a tsunami. It's so much greater. It crashes, the world crashes down.
It's a very difficult role to play in this search and rescue puzzle you were talking about before. This machine, this well-oiled machine that is Yostar. I mean, does it stay with you? Like, how do you deal with it yourself?
Oh, I went crazy. I did like, I want to say one summer I did 7 or 8. With a very short amount of time, I did 7 or 8 deaths, and they were a range of people dying in traumatic circumstances and then someone passing away because it was their time. They're older and they just didn't wake up, and I had this incident where I went to a function during a search, and I sort of turned up, and they said it was a board meeting for our nonprofit, and somebody said to me, "Are you okay?" And I just burst into tears, and I said, "Obviously not," and I walked away, and I sort of stopped being family liaison for about a year. And what ends up happening is you're exposed to so much of other people's trauma. There's a traumatic cost to you as well. And then over time, that magnifies into a point where you may not have, it's ghosted into you. So your ability to deal with complexity or your ability to manage emotions starts to get worn away. And so the thing that's helped me a lot is something called the stress continuum, which the Responder Alliance in the US has been pushing very hard, particularly for ski patrollers and people in search and rescue. And it's basically a little card that shows when you're ready through to being critically injured, and it shows how emotionally, mentally, physically you're processing information. And so for me, I got to a point where I just couldn't deal with complexity. And by that, I mean, I would open the refrigerator and there would be lots of nice stuff to eat, but I couldn't make a decision about what I wanted in a sandwich. So I would close the refrigerator, walk away, and be hungry because I couldn't make a complex decision. And that's when you've got a high degree of trauma. That's where you've got stuff that needs to be processed by professionals. And so we do a lot more work now on the squad in processing people's traumatic exposure. So we have this progression of checking in with people and making sure your community is aware of what's going on. And I'm in a much healthier place to deal with that level of impact. But we've all had trauma. Like all of us, it's not a merit-based thing like your trauma is worse than my trauma. I like that definition of trauma, which says trauma stops you living the life you want to live. And this stress continuum is a really good example of reminding you of when you're ready, when you're actually able to perform, what kept you in that position. So for me, if I get on the water in my boat, it resets my brain. And so last summer I had a pretty tough time. Stuff it's sort of post-COVID and dealing with some of the stuff we deal with. And my wife was like, what makes you happy? And I was like, being on the water. And at that moment, I put my boat up on the car rack again, and I drove to the river 3 times a week, and I paddled. We all need that reset. That's the beauty of the outdoors, is getting away from the blue light of the screen and getting away from media and getting away from Strava and getting away from collecting data, just losing yourself in those natural forces. It re-triggers maybe your circadian rhythms. I don't know, but it's a softer light. It's a softer world, and it's simpler. And that's the key to that mental health piece, is to make your life simpler.
Can I ask you this? Even that's what we talk about here on the Adventure Sports Podcast. You like use your. It's not the sport itself; it's a medium to be out in in nature. That's whether that's just walking around, sauntering, as John Muir did, or if it's downhill skiing, a 14er, whatever it is. For you, what's causing this trauma is being out there, things that are happening out there. Does it at all affect when you're out there to find peace? Because, you're on the water somewhere that you may have recently found a body, for instance. Is that, you know what I'm saying? Does it make the outdoor, do you look at the outdoors differently? Or do you look at Yosemite Valley differently?
Oh, yeah. There's places I won't walk in Yosemite Valley. Like, I won't go on a trail like the Mist Trail, which is one of the most popular trails.
Yeah.
Heads up by Nevada and Vernal Falls, with thousands of people on it doing things that people do in the outdoors. They get on the edge of stuff. They do goofy pictures, and you see hundreds of examples on a given day of people getting away with uninformed decisions, for want of a better word. Is they've got out on the edge on something, and for the most part they dodge it. They don't slip off, and so it's not news. And yeah, so I can't go to. There's certain places where, you drive by them, and I know why I don't go there anymore. It's taken the shine off the place. There's a lot of, but then I have a lot of colleagues who have done much more grisly stuff, and I use the word grisly, like picking up a body when it's come from a great height. It doesn't stay together. You're picking up parts of bodies who reset and recharge themselves by going back out and getting on the granite and going up and down it. I don't. I mean, there's places I don't train with people because of some of the history in those areas, and there's an inherent danger there. But I take people to them and I talk about it. And there was a recovery that we did in a really public place in the valley, and I went back to that place, and at low water, I sort of bumped and waded through where the person would have gone to try to understand the forces that were in there and what might have happened. And that was illuminating to me on a professional level. But I also stood on the rock that, we pulled that person out of the water on, and I remembered some of the emotions at that time. And everybody deals with it differently. But you're all feeling the impact. You may say, "Oh, I'm fine," but then you look at people's use of substances, or you look at their history around relationships, or you look at how or what they do to reset their brains, and it's more and more exposure, more and more risk. We all find different ways to deal with it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it.
It's kind of, I mean, it's depressing.
So
And like, I had a mission that went for months. So I was on an initial team. I was family liaison. I was in planning. I was on the final recovery months and months later. It's this huge journey. It's a privilege to be on that journey, because you're trying to solve it for the family, and then you get lucky and the family gets the body of their loved one back.
And can I ask this? It's for folks to know, it's a long journey like that a lot of times because the water level in a certain river, is that what it is?
Yeah, we went from, so you measure rivers, you can do it in like a marker on the side of the river, or you can do it in cubic feet per second. So the river might have been running at 5,000 cubic feet per second. When we actually got access to do a search, it was 11 cubic feet per second, and it was frozen. And that's so the difference between a summer incident and then actually finding conclusion in December. And our conclusion is not the conclusion. The conclusion for the family may never, ever happen. And that's the other piece. When search and rescue teams say, oh, we're happy to bring the family closure, or victims of crime closure, they haven't got closure. They've had this horrific thing happen. They're going to be thinking about it for a long, long time. It's presumptive to think we've healed anybody. All we've done is we've helped to clarify what's happened, and we've given them another step completed in that journey.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. That's so unique when the water's so high, raging through the rapids. I remember John talking about that in his presentation. Is like, there's no way if someone's pinned down there somewhere, we can't get them out. Like, there's nothing we could do. It's the forces of nature too great. It's months before the water is much more manageable. And that blew my mind, that knowing near a bridge that people hike, there could be a body down there that the search and rescue knows, but no one else does.
Right. And once we know something's happened, you'll put people out on the trail and you'll be watching, and there's regular patrols and you're watching bird behavior. And then once we have a really good clue, we might not be in the water. We might be coming vertically, so lowering down to try and pull that person's body out. But you have to use a lot of people and a lot of force. And I've actually turned up on scene where I've been ready to get in the water. And on big spring flow in the bottom of the valley, there's an area of class 4 rapids that are bigger rapids. You need to know what you're doing. And I feel I've done that section a lot. It's not an open section, but I've trained on that section. And I turned up one time ready to get in because we thought they'd gone in at the bridge. It was at Happy Isles. And I was ready to swim it, and it was huge. And I feel pretty good about that. But then you talk some more and you realize that it's up the trail and it's class 6 water, so it's unpaddleable. Although that's kind of open to question with the level that people are paddling now. But it's extremely consequential. You realize it's unsurvivable. And that person, I don't know, we found them like 3 months later. But then it's like figuring out clues. You're sitting there saying, oh, we found this jacket and somebody smelled something, and oh, it could be in this location. And then you add all those pieces up, and then suddenly you've narrowed your search area. And then somebody who's really experienced goes out and knows where to look and how to look. And it's right there. The body is right there in a view shed. No member of the public's seen it, but the experienced searcher has spotted it. But then you have all these sort of pieces that's really sad, and every so often you get a good one. Like I had a really good one last week. I had a fantastic
Tell
one
us
last
about
week.
that. Tell us about a good one.
So last week we had somebody who was reported late for winter hike, and we put a lot of people on the ground who are really experienced and had a really defined search area. And this person made all the right decisions. They bivvied up when they realized they were a bit lost, and they got up the next day and they started trekking their way out, and the hasty team found their track and then came up on them. And I got to ring a family up last week and say, I'd actually just briefed them about what had happened, and they picked up the phone again. I said, they're alive and we've got them, was the first thing I said. And I've said that, as I said, a handful of times, and it all worked. We have 220 missions a year in Yosemite-ish. We have 10 to 20 fatalities a year. So we have a lot of missions that are twisted ankle, put them in a litter, roll them down the trail. They're super psyched. They might be a bit uncomfortable, but they're super psyched. They're not there anymore. And then there's some helicopter rescues, and there's some quick emergency CPR happening. But so there's more good news there. The things that makes the news is the tragedy, because we want to avoid that. We want to find a way to mitigate, to find a way to have people make good decisions.
That's awesome. And yeah, I'd love to ask more about that. I'm sorry, I feel like we're going all over the place, but it's so interesting. I kind of don't even know where to start. You've got such a storied career. Do you have a story about potentially one of the most interesting or bizarre or just perplexing rescues you've ever had to deal with? Maybe that had a clear outcome or not.
We had one where there was a incident on the north end of the park where a younger person, like a student, had walked away from their group and just disappeared, and the group had looked for them, and they hadn't found them, and they were right next to some pretty cliffed out area with a big lake, and everything about it presented as bad news. It was going to be water, drowning, cliff in the dark, walk off, inadequately prepared hypothermia, all these things. I was just thinking, this does not look good. First 24 hours. And as the investigators drilled down on it, it turned out they'd been out a lot longer. I think they'd been out maybe 12 hours or 24 hours longer than we thought. And there was suspicion about why that was. And it was probably drug use within the student group. And they had been tentative in revealing that. And so we're a little bit further behind. So this person's been out even longer. And maybe they're tripping. Who knows? What could have happened? And we're sitting there, and they start to give the description of this young man, and they have a photograph. And what they show is this sort of scraggly haired, feral child, for want of a better word. And what he's wearing, a sleeveless plaid shirt is the description, cut off jeans, and he's wearing those 5-toed plastic shoes that were all the rage a few years ago. Yeah, Vibrams, and like that's his outfit. That is what he's walked away from the group in, and there's this look on him. And I remember looking around at everybody else, and people started smiling. We're like, this guy's gonna make it. Like, there's just something about this total package that says, no matter what is thrown at me, I'm probably gonna come through this with a great story. And sure enough, I don't know, 12 hours later, they found him. They were flying helicopter patterns, and they came over and they spotted him, and he was like totally psyched to see the helicopter, and the helicopter touches down, and they're down slope of him. I mean, he's up slope of them, and he comes running down the hill, which is a very dangerous thing to do because the rotors that are whipping around, and they pile out helicopter and like, go back, don't run into the helicopter. The irony that he could have survived that and then run into the helicopter was not lost on me. And we heard they got him, and we were pretty excited. And I made a decision that I wasn't going to say we actually had him until the helicopter was on the ground. And so we had to wait for them to fly back to base, and then they radioed in. But that kid, I hope he realizes he did a good job. I still don't know quite why he wandered away from the group. But that's where it comes out, and you're all smiling, and you're pretty happy about it. It's good.
Not particularly bizarre. Where he is now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope he kind of tells the story with a degree of humility. But if he doesn't, it's a good story, and somebody may get something out of it. There are other ones that you have where somebody disappears, and around water, they can only go in one direction in water. They can't go upstream. The point of entry, they're going to go down. And it's always amazing that you can do all these theories. It's going to be within the first 300 feet, or this is what's going on. And so rarely do you actually know where they're going to turn up. And then they turn up draped over a log on the side of the river, and they may have been there for a few days before somebody noticed, because they've become part of the environment. And then we've got 2, I think, active in the park right now where people walked away or off trail, and we've got no sign of them. We've got nothing. We don't know. We know where they went on the trailhead. We know where they took their backpack off, and there is zero other information despite hundreds of hours on the ground looking for them.
Has anything ever felt, any rescue that felt intentional?
No, I haven't dealt with anything like that. I've definitely dealt with things where you say, what just happened? And they explain all these pieces. But generally, again, that all of those pieces that you look at that may be bizarre, suddenly they all start falling into place because you hear about the person's emotional and mental state. You hear about what they're dealing with. So if it's somebody who's planning to take their life, those things start to fall into place. But no, most I would say everything's pretty grounded. Like a disappearance is a disappearance. There are some laughable ones that you like somebody who says we had somebody with a spot device a few years ago when they first came out who starts to sort of message in on whatever. I don't know if it was spot, but they were messaging on something. They said, I'm having a heart attack and I am, at this location. And it takes hours to respond and to get the flight plan, to get the crew up and to get that location. And so they're told to stay in position. And, a little while later, an hour or so later, we get another message and they say, I'm feeling better. I am at this location. And we're like, okay, do you need help? No, I'm good. And then an hour later, they come in, or a couple of hours later, they come in together and say they're having another heart attack. Actually, what they were experiencing was altitude. And what they'd experienced at altitude was heightened respiration rate, heightened pulse, and then they went down and they felt better, and they were like, "Oh, I'm okay now," and they felt so much good. I'm going to go back up to altitude, and then you got altitude again. So that's the laughable point of it. It's yeah, the bizarre side of it. There's definitely things that are investigations that the law enforcement are tied into that confuse them because there are odd things that happen, but we're out of that investigation piece. That search and rescue is response.
What kind of trends have you seen over the years? Pre-COVID, parks getting so much attention. The people going middle of summer in Yosemite is a zoo. Pandemic happens, everything shuts down temporarily. Then just unexpectedly things pick back up. Probably even more so. What kind of things have you noticed in the world of search and rescue, like trends?
There's a lot more people using wild spaces and learning how to use their equipment. I think there's a bit of an accelerated, unchaperoned apprenticeship that people are serving because they know that they don't want to be inside anymore and they want to go outside and do stuff. And with the nature of Instagram and self-promotion, your adventure isn't an adventure until it looks extreme. And so people are putting themselves increasingly in situations that are above their experience level. So you might have a really good canoe roll, or you might be able to climb 510, a harder grade in the gym, but being in class 5 water or being on a sea of granite on a remote peak is a very different undertaking. So if you might be able to do a single pitch at a higher grade in the safety and warmth of the gym, but really you aren't equipped to do an easy 5-4 alpine route at 13 pitches because you don't understand about weather. You don't understand thunderstorms. You got out of camp late. You went out when it was sunny, and then you're shot halfway up the face when massive thunderheads roll straight over the back of the peak. And you're like, what do I do now? And I think that I hope that there's a reset around apprenticeship and mentorship, the idea that we look to peers or look to leaders to help refine our skills and help shepherd us through that understanding our limitation phase. And that I haven't seen that yet, but I hope for that. Like I like the fact that outdoor retailers offer workshops on how to read a map over a GPS. That's great. And I think it's great you can go out and learn some stuff, but you also should be building your community to go and have your own adventure and have that adventure in your little adventure core without the training wheels. So if somebody comes up here and they say, I'm really excited about doing a peak, then do a trail up a peak first. Don't do the open slab route. And there's sometimes there's that need for that picture. If you actually went through I just realized if you went through all your first year of adventures without a single picture being taken, you're probably going to get a lot more out of it because you're never posing. And all your memories are getting processed within your head. It's like you don't have that distraction of performance.
Do you find people trying to take pictures and, I don't know, capture the moment when you're rescuing them? The ones that survive, of course.
there have been some good videos in the last couple of years of people being taken off of El Cap and a couple of other places by climbing partners. So in that moment, it's safe. They're on a big anchor. People want to take some photographs. When you put in a litter and you're going to be run down a trail, the last thing on your mind is, I want to take pictures, because you're tied down in it. People's eyes get incredibly big because they have this. When I turn up, what I used to turn up on carryouts, and people are like, "You want me to get in that?" And you're like, "Yeah, this is how we get you down." They'd be like, "Oh, actually, my injury isn't as bad as I thought it were." I don't know what they thought they were going to get, whether it was a golf cart or they were going to get a helicopter
Just
to come
carried.
up and do it. Yeah, you're going to be carried, but you're not just going to be carried. We're going to tie you down really tightly so you don't fall out, and then we're going to run down a rocky trail with you, and there's going to be tons of shouting, and we're just going to bust down the trail and get you out of here as quickly as possible. And it's terrifying. I've been in litters when we've been on trainings, and you are not in control. And you either have to be genuinely injured on a lot of pain meds and just slip to silence, or you have these stilted conversations because you kind of want to hear that you're going to be safe, and that happens. We put somebody on the head and they talk to them, or there are people who are just terrified the whole way down. The suit they use on the helicopter is called the screamer suit, and they buckle you in so you can't really move, and then you get hooked in on the harness and you get taken away. And I do not like edges. Like if I get rung up to do anything that's technical with ropes and pullers, I make sure I'm going to manage that anchor, and I'm going to be really good at that prussuck, and I'm on it. But never put me off the edge. Years ago, there was a massive El Cap rescue, and I got rung up to go up in the helicopter to go up top. And I was like, "Do you know who you phoned up?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's you." And I was like, "You must have asked everybody. You must have everybody who is available up there already if you're asking me to get in a helicopter to go up and be part of a rigging thing." And they said, "We have asked everybody." And I was so relieved when I turned up, because they managed to get hold of 4 or 5 old timers like Dan McDivitt, Pete Takeda, and a couple of others. And it was this roll call of incredible climbers who'd come out to help the community on this massive rescue. And I was so relieved to walk out in my flight suit and realize I could take it off and not have to go up there. The same actually in Wales. I was on a mountain rescue in Wales where it was horrible weather, and they fly these big, I think the Wessex helicopters. They're big, heavy duty helicopters, and that you have to put your climbing harness on to get on. And there was space for one of the mountain rescue crew to go up to do this response. And I looked around and realized everybody in the group, there was probably 5 or 6 of us, all of us were very slowly putting our harnesses on. We were putting them fast enough on to look like we were responding, but not so fast that we would finish first. And this one guy finished first, and bang, they grabbed him and got him on the helicopter. And all of us breathed a collective sigh of relief that we did not need to be the hero in that moment. Because it's those people who are flying those pieces, the helicopter pilots are extraordinary. The helicopter crews are extraordinary. They're a very tight group. They're in this machine that has so many things that could go wrong. They pull off extraordinary things, and people take it for granted, and they don't realize how many calculations of risk are being made on their benefit. So it better be a genuine rescue. If you can stumble out on your ankle and not put 4 or 5 people at risk in the helicopter, that's a good thing. But as soon as you get a helicopter involved, there's a lot of people at risk.
Mm.
It has to be real.
Wow. So speaking of which, being on this side of the equation for so long, what is something you really want or wish the public would know when going to Yosemite, going to some of these places? Obviously, there's basic things, but is there anything that maybe gets overlooked a little bit?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is the first part of any redundancy and safety is yourself. So make sure you have water, make sure you have snacks, make sure you have something for a rainy day. Make sure all those pieces. The very first thing is you don't look for somebody else to help you. Can you help yourself? And then your second piece of redundancy is a friend. And it's either telling somebody where you're going really clearly and not changing your plan, or having somebody else out in the field with you that you've come up with the way you're going to manage risk out there. And so the most conservative, the safest option will always win. You don't need to argue about it. You set that up before you leave the trailhead. And then the third part of redundancy is the people who are sort of away, again, who know what you're doing, like at home or on the telephone. They know they're going to get a text. So the very outer circle is actually the responders. They're almost the last people you call. And so that redundancy inside is do you know how to tape an ankle that's been twisted really badly? Go and do a wilderness first responder course. Do you know how to use your GPS unit? And then when that doesn't work, do you know how to read a map as a group? That's another piece of redundancy. You can do so much on a basic level to actually enrich your experience because you're becoming self-reliant. And self-reliance is the piece at which you start really pushing out and risking more because you're making it as a calculated gesture based on your experience level. That's a really good place to be. There was an American Express, or there's a credit card at some point that had a guaranteed rescue around the world. And we had a spate of phone calls that would come off the top of Half Dome where people would be like, I would like to be rescued now. And they would ring up dispatch and say, can you take the helicopter up there for this guaranteed rescue? And we would say, well, it doesn't work like that. That's for emergencies. This is not an emergency. This is just somebody who's tired, who's exercising their worldwide rescue privilege. And they have to go back down. There's no reason to land a helicopter up there. That's presumptive of somebody else bailing you out. And I think the final part of it is when you need help or you see people struggling, offer help and accept help. I think it's easy in the city and urban environment. You'll see people threaten violence, and it's scary. And I get it. I understand that piece. In the backcountry, when somebody's hurting, put your own ascent on hold to go and help somebody else. The reward is so much greater.
Maybe someone's never really thought about doing this before, who enjoys the outdoors, but maybe looking for maybe a little more purpose or a greater reward, like you were talking about. How do you get involved in this if you're not, careered like you are, if you're just wanting to enter it now?
I think build up a personal resume of basic skills, being able to look after yourself in the outdoors. Go and volunteer and get trained by your local search and rescue group. Go out and do a longer training thing if you can afford it with something like National Outdoor Leadership School or Outward Bound. Look around in the community, in the ski community, somebody who works within National Ski Patrol and ask them to mentor you. And I think quite often there's a lot of exclusion in the outdoor world because of money, because of financial pieces and culturally pieces. And I think we have a duty to diversify our constituent group in a welcoming manner. And if the barrier should not be gear, the barrier should not be access to equipment. And so all of us who are in the outdoors, if you go in our storage area, we have multiple bits of climbing gear. We have multiple sets of skis. We have may have multiple boats. Consider whether you need all that stuff and donate it to groups like Big City Mountaineers or your scouting group or the youth hostel, Boys and Girls Club, so they have the equipment to have people start to have their own adventure. The irony is that we have moved to a minimalist idea in the outdoors, less weight, smaller tents, more expense with that. And I like the idea of being a big tent place where we have room for everybody. And I think that the landscape needs people to advocate for it, and it needs it from every part of this country. In the same way that all of the different nationalities and all the different countries and all the different groups they should have a place in the outdoors, because we're all looking at the same sunset. We're all appreciating it in different ways, but we're looking at the same thing, and we're all warmed by that. We're all warmed by that. That's the way we should. I would encourage everybody to think about, what is your legacy? Your legacy shouldn't be a bunch of Instagram pictures. It should be the way you've directly opened the door for somebody else to walk in.
Oh, so Moose, tell us about your most recent book, When Accidents Happen. Like what should folks expect reading that, and also tell us a little bit about what you do at Nature Bridge.
So I've got a couple of books out. When Accidents Happen is a book that looks at crisis communication, and it's set up for people who want to be involved in family liaison. And it's one approach to doing a complex job. So it's the idea that this is a skeleton of ideas and approaches, and then you can inhabit it with your style or what your jurisdiction or your organization needs. And then I have a second book out that came out a couple of weeks ago called Searching. And that book is just looking at search and rescue missions. And it's not about high visibility, high adventure ones. It's about the run-of-the-mill exercise that we go out on. And it's everything from me diving to do recovering a bear's telemetry collar on a drowned bear in the river, through to dealing with being part of a negotiation team for somebody who's trying to end their life. And it's looking at the overall impact of exposure to that level of trauma. And at Nature Bridge, which is my primary job, I'm the senior project director, and my main purpose for the last 17 years has been building a permanent home for education for young people in Yosemite National Park. And we're building a 224-bed environmental science campus that will work with the University of California, Merced, and other organizations to make sure that young people have affordable options to come and recreate and learn in one of the iconic national parks in the country.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. I remember wanting to work for Nature Bridge while I was there, but moving away from the valley. So it's so cool to see that it's growing and the bridge is widening. You know?
Yeah, we serve. Pre-COVID, we were serving 30,000 students a year, and we'll be getting back there. We've got 3 or 4 locations around the country. And every park has some sort of education program, and they're not necessarily affiliated with Nature Bridge, but they have value and they have purpose. And I think it's a really good place to consider donating money or time, again, because post-COVID, the people who are going to have less options and less access are people who are in underserved communities. And so we need to, again, keep the door open to allow them to have that pivotal experience early.
Man, Moose, this is awesome. Thank you for telling some stories. And it was like a river, you know, and didn't necessarily know where it would go, but I appreciate you just riffing with me and telling some of this, and yeah, getting a little more awareness out there for sure. It was a lot of people are itching to be outside, especially after COVID or during COVID. So it's I'm sure you are seeing a lot. So thank you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I just want to encourage people to go out there and make sure you come back to tell your story and not be the story.
Yes. Well, cut off flannel, jean shorts, whatever you got to do to make it more epic. Just watch out for the rotors. Watch out for the rotors.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Moose.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.